Where did Persia come from? When is the first time it's even mentioned? Is it only in Hebrew? In history books that we find the emergence of Paras? We find even before Daniel, we find in the prophet Yechezkel, in the book of Yechezkel, the first time that the word Paras is mentioned. In chapter 27 of Yechezkel or Ezekiel, verse 10, it says, Paras velud. Paras velud. When I noticed that for the first time, that struck me as so unusual, and yet it reminded me of the Zohar. For those of you who read occasionally the Zohar, whether it's in English or in Hebrew, there is constant reference to the Shimon going from Lud to Lud. Always. Going from away from Lud or going to Lud. We think Lud is in Israel. But actually, Lud is already explained in the Zohar that it was not referring to a place. It was not referring to a place. But in any event, in this verse in Yechezkel is the first time that Paras is mentioned. Going into a little of the history, we know that the Jews were located in Israel, and then the king of Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the first temple and drove all the Jews eastward, because Babylonia is east of Israel, as opposed to the destruction of the second temple, where suddenly all the Jews were driven westward. Now you would say, naturally, because Babylonia comes from the eastern part of Israel, Iraq, and all of that vicinity. More importantly, we might even say the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers is where this whole concentration of Babylonia was located. And so they took their slaves back with them to their country. And one might say the Roman Empire, which was located in the west of Israel, when they destroyed the second temple, so they took their captives with them to the west. And so history emerged. You had Jews in the west and Jews in the east. That's the way historically it happened. But even that should have provided us with a great deal of significance. If we think for a moment, where does the word paras come from? Does it have any connection in the Torah? Is there a mention of the word paras? We say it means Persia, but there was no Persia at the same time. But the word paras also comes from the word mafreses parsa. We're speaking about split hooves. Parsa or paras means split. Split. Meaning right and left. Meaning right and left. A kosher animal, to be considered kosher, must have split hooves, but it also must have another ingredient. It must have central column. The chewing of the cud. When an animal, kosher animal, which is considered kosher, and why is it considered a kosher animal? Because first of all, it must display the right and left, and also it must display that once it eats, it must return the food. In other words, a kind of restriction. This animal has a consciousness of restriction. It eats the food, gives back the food, and therefore it now contains 3 columns, right and left, indicated by the split hoof, and also the chewing of the cud, the returning the food. Paras had only the double, splitting of the hooves. The reason the Jews went eastward was, like the Torah, like the Talmud says, the Zohar says, they did not exercise central column. And therefore the idea of Paras to emerge, and Lud in fact is the central column. Lud is the central column. The reason such a name came about, the Jews initiated, because where did it come from? It came from Ezekiel. Before it is even mentioned, the first time that it is recorded anywhere, that name of Paras is only in Ezekiel. There is no other mention. Neither historians, general historians, will bring up the idea of a country called Persia. No one knows where it originates, other than those who will refer to the writings of Ezekiel, which took place long before the kingdom of Persia emerged. Why? Because how do we know what really happened? How do we know what happened? How does the Zohar know what happened? And how does the Zohar know what will happen? Was he a prophet, Rabbi Shimon? No. He was able to decodify Ezekiel, and as we shall shortly see, Daniel. The Rabbi Shimon and the sages of the Talmud were able to decipher this code, because the Torah is anything but a historical record of what happened. And certainly a historical record cannot tell you what will happen. And yet the Zohar knows what will happen in the future, and he records it for us because he gleans out his information from the Torah, which for him is not an historical record of events, but rather it is coded information that can assist us in understanding what happened, why it happened, and what will happen, and how you can prevent things from happening. So the first time that Paras is mentioned is in Ezekiel.